Don't go
I
anywhere.
mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.
All right, everybody. So back here at I Mix What I Like, I'm very excited about this because for a long time, I never got a chance to meet the brother in person. And I only vaguely think I may have been live at an event where he was maybe once. But as any of us who grew up, coming up of a certain age and a political awareness in the 80s and 90s, those of us who listened to cassette lecture tapes, delivering pizzas and doing our work or whatever, watch the old VHS tapes, those of us who came of age learning about political prisoners and pan-africanism during this time, and who would have been at all interested in the African role in internationalist radical politics and history, any one of us would have been made familiar or become aware of Elombe Brath. And even when, if some of us might remember, even when shows like Democracy Now! were more connected to their origins and roots, you would see him there as well from time to time. For those of us who watched and came of age watching the CIA whistleblower John Stockwell, one of the big whistleblowers that came out in our generation. We saw Elombe Brath in dialogue with him. We saw Elombe Brath in dialogue with Daruba and everybody else. This was a giant of a figure. So when I was able to get in touch with Cinque Brath, our next guest of the Elombe Brath Foundation, I was very excited to do so. So we'll bring Brother Cinque up now, and welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. It is an honor to have you. Good morning.
Thank you, Jared. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
So
as we close out Black History Month, especially.
Well,
but we all know. Also, pleasure for you to be here with you too, Jackie.
The honor is mine, and I'm really just going to sit here and mute myself and listen. That's all I'm going to do. Thank you.
No, don't do that. Don't do that. But as Elombe would have, and Alfred would have said, that like there is no beginning and end to Black history. So right. so like there is no. So can we just start with some of the basics? And admittedly, sure. I want to do this again. So I don't want this to be our first time doing this, and I want to be more prepared. I was late in catching up to getting us arranged, and honestly, just full disclosure, I would have loved to have more clips ready so we could hear, and all that. But YouTube for now, Elombe is everywhere. But who is Elombe Brath, and what is his legacy to this day?
Well, the funny thing about it, that is so hard to say because he has worn so many hats and he has done so many things he's been involved with. Some people know him for his work with political prisoners. That's really how they know him. And part of that working with political prisoners is they might have been an inmate because he used to go to the island or into the prisons and speak to prisoners. He was heavily involved with Adam Abdul Hakim, Larry Davis case, consulting and advising him, saying that no, Larry Davis, you picked this young man up at this early age. He's a political prisoner, making a case for that. And, one of the things he would use is the Patricia Mumba Coalition forums. The Patricia Mumba Coalition forums in Harlem ran for a very long time on Friday nights. And not only were they did so many things. It was African internationalists. We had people like Thomas Sankara come there right before he was killed. We had a lot of heads of state come there, pick their bones there. We had community events, even when there were disagreements between people who are Black nationalists and people who are in the Nation of Islam over certain things. So the Patricia Mumba Coalition, was founded in 1975 by Elombe Brath and Irvin Davis primarily. And they started it off there, Their main goal really was not just the Congo, but for African independence movements. We start talking about ANC in South Africa, supporting SWAPO in Namibia, Frelimo in Mozambique, ZANU in Zimbabwe. So it's is a lot going on, you know what I mean, at the Harriet Tubman School and what the Patricia Mumba Coalition was doing. But even, you know, prior to that, you know, one of the first and mega events that Elombe was involved in was the African Jazz Art Society and Studio, which started in 1956. And hopefully this year, it should have happened already, there will be a street naming in honor of where that organization was founded at, in the Bronx, in the South Bronx, on 751 Kelly Street, in the basement of my grandparents' house, later on this year. It should have really already happened. Kind of ticked off about that, but it's okay. And what people don't know, though, about that early foray is, well, they actually started off as Jazz Art Society, because my father, he was a creative, you know, he was a designer, he was a you know, he was an artist, you know, he was a creative. Like, so when people think about his work on Like It Is and what he was doing on Like It Is, you know, it would say graphic engineer, consultant. He was a consultant in the capacity when you bring in on people like Sam Njomo, first president of Namibia. You bring in like people like Robert Mugabe. You bring in like Maurice Bishop, Grenada. You know, these personalities on. That was what he was doing.
I got to jump in here. I'm sorry.
Sure.
So this is I did not know this. I knew of him obviously being a guest on Like It Is with Gil Noble. Rest in peace to Gil Noble. And people got to understand. I got to get my man Todd on here to really get into. He's the supreme historian on that, and had me. You know, my one meeting with Gil Noble was because of Todd. I got to shout out, respect. I'll respect do that. But I did not know Elombe. So real quick, Elombe was your father.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. I have 6 siblings. I have 5 brothers and a sister. I'm in the middle, 3 older, 3 younger.
Right on.
Yeah, so I was I was the one though who did the most traveling with my father, the most work with my father, traveled with him abroad internationally, and more so took the most interest in the sort of work that he was doing, and, you know, trying to keep all the documentation of these events, you know, in line with what he didn't complete or what he didn't do. But yeah, he was at in fact, and there's a book that's edited by Herb Boyd. But it's just some of the essays. Bernard White, former general manager of WBAI, where Elombe had the radio show Africa Kaleidoscope for many years. He tells the story about Bernard said he was there when the State Department came in and told ABC that my father couldn't work on Like It Is anymore and with Gil Noble. And so Bernard White goes in. That part, it's about a 4-page intro, and he tells what happened when the State Department came in and said this can't be done anymore. This relationship.
So that's where I was going.
Stop.
So Elombe he was working officially with the Gil Nobles.
Oh yeah, no, he worked it Like It Is, man, for many years.
And that's how he helped round out some of that guest list.
Yeah, and in fact,
that guest list, boy.
Yeah, all of those international guests. Gil will tell you himself. Gil was like that. He didn't know these people. He didn't know these heads of state. He didn't know these leaders. He did not have that reach. He always says that's Elombe Brath. You know, Gil makes no bones about that sort of thing. You know, that's how that was happening.
Somehow I didn't know that. And then the State Department came in and said that this can't happen.
Yeah, but the State Department really also came up because they were shooting a program about Zionism and the Palestinian situation. And what happened was there was some some cameramen who were Jewish, of the Jewish faith, and they was watching this because, you know, it was pre-recorded, it wasn't live. They got on the phone and they started calling people and like saying like, no, this show cannot get out on these airways. Because if you remember at that time, Jared, New York City did not have TV was different. You did not have 100, 300 channels.
That's right.
We went out on ABC. I mean, Like It Is, ABC, CBS, NBC. Those were the main 3 networks. So you sort of had like a captive audience. You might have a little bit of Channel 5. They weren't called Fox then, I believe. It was, I forget, but Channel 9 or an 11 and stuff. But the major networks were basically three: ABC, NBC, and CBS. And so, like it is, which played out in the tri-state area. I mean, that was a Black
crazy.
Public Affairs show. That was, you know, where everything.
And to think of it on ABC is crazy.
Watching some of this with my mom, like we could sort of we could pick it up sometimes. We were in DC, and she get all excited. I was like, with my mom, like watching, and she's telling me, and I remember like, you know, this person, her telling me like, you know, he's talking to someone from Africa, and my mom would be like, we're from Africa, and I'm like 5, and I'm like, okay. I don't know what. Yeah, so that's just like really, really cool to remember this, and just wild.
You know,
I mean, I had to get it on. I never remember seeing it live. I never remember seeing Like It Is within like a normal time frame of the original broadcast. I only ever saw them on VHS tapes that I would get at Everyone's Place in Baltimore. Shout out to Everyone's Place. Or they would put the audio on cassettes. And not just Everyone's Place, shout out to them, but also like Pyramid Books, and that used to be in Georgia Avenue in DC, and the Blue Nile used to have tapes in there, you know, but they would, and it would be like Gil Noble Like It Is tapes. So that was the only way I got to interact. And especially looking back, I'm like, damn, that was on ABC. It's crazy to think that like now it would be some hot but still probably marginalized YouTube show right now or something.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
you couldn't.
Anyway.
Yeah. they were not a lot. You didn't have the variety of thought and perspectives back then that you have now. But like you say, even now, you know, you might have a large audience, but it might be only internet, you know. I mean, even radio was different, though. You know.
Oh no!
You mentioned Democracy Now, and Amy Goodman. She was in her infancy. And if you get her, I think it's the book "Respect to the Rulers." She says that how she learned radio was through Samori Marksman, WBAI, and Elombe Brath. She says that,
and then she even goes on to say all of the. She's like gives a shout out to like the broader pan-Africanist community.
Yeah.
She uses that phrase or something to that, like in the book.
Yeah.
So anyway, so like some of us who remember where that show started, it is I can't listen or watch anymore, but it is I mean, it was a whole anyway, it's crazy.
Right. But I know it's changed for sure.
But I did want you to like if we could, like you mentioned your a little bit of the background of your father's, like how did your father get to be like, where did his politics come from? Where does your family come from? Like, where does this start?
Well, my father's side come from Barbados, Christchurch and Black Rock. Although my father was born in Brooklyn, and his younger brothers, he actually has another brother who
Did the State Department get us again? I think the State Department got involved again.
The man got us again.
They got us again. We were just about to get cooking. Hold on, we'll get him back on here. We should have known that. But it is kind of true. Oh no, you've got to. Everyone's Place, by the way, it is. In all sincerity, it's my favorite bookstore ever. It is. I grew up in that bookstore. Politically, I mean. And I used to, you want to talk about contradictions. I mean, one of my favorite was because I used to deliver pizzas here in Howard County, and I would either before my shift or after go into Baltimore, swing through some who will know this will recognize, swing through North Carey Street real quick and stop through and pick up a little something, and then swing around over to Pennsylvania Avenue and over to Everyone's Place and pick up my books, lecture tapes. They had the best bean pies in that joint. You could get your oils, little jewelry if you needed something like it was like, and then they had, and it used to be in the back wall upstairs. just a wall of cassettes. And,
yeah, the
and then eventually,
ooh, man.
so I stayed, so I stayed on them, and that's how I was introduced to all of this.
Yeah.
I for years I heard James Turner on audio tapes for years before I ended up at Africana. I heard Elombe usually playing like an introductory role, like on the Patricia Mumba Coalition tapes. Like he would be introducing, and like he hosted, and in fact Cinque is back.
Yeah.
Elombe hosted the Daruba bin Wahad, John Henry Clark, and Amiri Baraka debate on Spike Lee's Malcolm X.
Oh my!
That came out before the movie came out. They debated it because they had read some of the scripts. Amiri had seen it, and he introduced that joint, and that was so. Anyway, my point is, please continue. Where
it was an article. He said, this can't be another Spike Lee joint. That was the criticism of it. Yeah, because some of the stuff that Spike initially had in there was out of this world, so to speak.
It was crazy, and they said it was on that. They talked about Warner Brothers at the time was saying we're going to turn Malcolm X into a brand like The Simpsons and Batman.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God!
And I was like, even then, I was like, no, that can't be right. That doesn't even make any sense.
Oh my God!
Anyway,
capitalism, they can commercialize anybody or anything. That's one thing I realized. I mean, anything they can do it. They've got the money, and people are dumbed down enough that they'll go for it. Especially if you keep pushing it, So I don't even.
Sorry.
No, I don't know where I don't know where my connection fizzled out. It just all of a sudden. Boop,
you were just talking about we said the State Department got you again. We were saying you were just starting to talk about.
You have been rendition, so like
sometimes these things. The first thing I did think was conspiracy. I'm not gonna lie. Like, why did this happen? I've done things, but why? If I'm talking about something that's not internationalist, if I'm just dealing with, a lighter aspect of history, that never happens. As soon as I go into something international, that's when the problem starts.
See, it's not just me. I'm not the only one who thinks that.
No, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean it's not happening.
Exactly. So doesn't, as they said, just because I'm paranoid, but doesn't mean it's not out to get you.
So, but you were talking about your father and his brothers and coming out of Barbados, because I was trying to get a little bit, because I'm just curious, like, how did I never
because really he got exposure very early on. We have a famous first cousin named Clennell Wickham. He was a socialist, and he was the editor at the Herald newspaper in Barbados. So he would often write these open editorials and encouraging the masses to rise up against the plantation class. So he was a subject of conversation at many dinner table with my father growing up, with my grandparents and such. So he was getting exposed very early on, to outside of the box thinking, or, why Clennell Wickham was all about these workers' rights and these Black people controlling their production in Barbados, But the thing is, he wasn't just any. He was the newspaper editor, of the Herald. Eventually he was kicked out of Barbados, and he sort of died in exile. Although, and that's the family story we understand. Although the new book that the University of Mississippi did about my father, they contradict that, so to speak. They're saying that the paper had more financial troubles. There's a book that the University of Mississippi Press did. It's called The Artistic Activism of Elombe Brath. And this is and this is in his early days. This is this is how Elombe first comes on the scene and gets introduced to the world. He was.
So you feel like the book did a good job?
They did a good job overall.
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
Yeah.
Okay,
There's certain few minor things in there that I don't think that they represent it in the best way or in the best understanding, but overall, yes, they did a very thorough, very thorough. And, you know, they have looked at my father's early life like never. Like when I look at here, they recovered certain artwork and certain things. Like they were doing their work, because I remember I got a call about news clippings from early 1960s about an arrest, what happened there when they went to the Philadelphia Police Department, that they had no record of Elombe being arrested and stuff. So they were going and doing their work. You know, they were going back into Barbados, you know, they were going in. But outside of Colonel Wickham's early influence on my father being talked about, there was a brother in 1948. He introduced my father and my uncle Kwame to, you know, some what people might call radical sort of teacher. His Christian name was Leslie Scott. And for some reason right now, I am drawing a blank on what his name was, but he first got them into politics. Even though they were in the arts and they were creators, he was someone who danced. He was Porgy and Bess. He sung. He was in the arts world, and they started taking some classes with him about when the Arab, Palestinian, and Israeli war jumped off, about who was right and all of this sort of thing. So he was their sort of like first sort of mentor guy. And he was someone who, you know, he quote unquote, I hate to use this term, was basically blackballed because he had changed his name to from Leslie Scott to for some reason, again, I can't recall his name right now, but if anybody has like Instagram, if they go to at Ajazz1956, AJASS 1956, there's a little something about him. And he was very political, and he was having these classes with them and exposing them in 1940s, you know. So very early on, they had this sort of exposure, at least, and my father, you know, it was an extension of things he had exposed to very early on. And, you know, even made for my father to be different, because there was a time early on with certain giants in the Black community, they were not feeling Fidel, you know, because they were not really feeling socialism and all these sort of things. And my father was like, nah, Fidel is the man, you know. You know, he was embracing Fidel at that time. Even, you know, in a number of communities when, you know, 1959 Bay of Pigs happened, because again, Colonel Wickham, if anyone wants to do a search or find out about him, was the first cousin, and my father already had this sort of exposure to, you know, from a family member in that sort of history. So he was already exposed early on and sort of politicized early on, also with another gentleman. Again, I was ashamed I can't remember Leslie Scott's name. I can only remember his Christian name right now. Usually it's the other way around.
Right. But first of all, like I said, man, I'm very glad to have you on, and I want to just say publicly that this doesn't have to be the last time, and I want, you know, this show and this platform to be available to you and your work, and anytime you want to do something or share something, or we can talk about your father's work. I mean, I'm happy to do that, because I mean, you know, ever since I reached out to you whenever it was ago on Instagram, I was like, first of all, I remember when I saw Elombe Brath Foundation on Instagram, I was like, what? I was like amped. I was like, hell yeah. I was like, I wasn't even thinking of him in that space like that, right? You know, so it was
well, it's, you know, Jared, it's anyway, a lot. It's a lot of work that, you know, we have to do. I'm also on a board for UPAMA, you know, and one of the goals is for us to all of those over the last 50 years. So the Elombe Brath Foundation has Africa Kaleidoscope, you know, all of those internationalist guests, especially African and Caribbean heads of state, all of those interviews, all of that exposure we want to digitize that, make that available. A lot of times it's like reinventing the wheel. These leaders have spoken. They've said what was happening in their country.
Wow.
You know, so we want to make that available, but not just for the Patricia Mumba Coalition events. We're talking about Africa Kaleidoscope events. So that's what the Elombe Brath Foundation have been working on in digitization. But UPAMA, which I'm also a board member, is looking for the New York tri-state area. All of these events, from Dr. Clark's speaking, Dr. Pitt, all of these Samori Marksman, you know, but all of the significant events, you know, digitizing them, because as you mentioned earlier, Jared, a lot of this stuff is on VHS tapes, audio cassette tapes. That's not a palatable format for what our young people are doing today and what's happening today.
It's not even possible anymore. Like it's you can't even find a CD player or a cassette player anymore without going through a lot of work. And like my students have literally never seen one. Like, they don't even know what it is. Like I put up a picture of a cassette, just like, have you ever seen a cassette? Like, I just like, you know, like, so, but getting a tape player and then actually wanting to go, and then honestly, why should they? Like, it's a digital era. We need to be click, and then let's get it. So, and my own library has been depleted over the years, which was pretty thick at one point. So I would love, and if we can help with any of that, please.
I'll shoot the link for also UPAMA also to you later, but and the work that we're doing with UPAMA. But you know, one of the things is I had already even the flyers of themselves are treasures. When you start seeing the formats about, you know, the Giuliani when he was first coming to power, you know, and all of this stuff on political prisoners, some who are no longer here. Academic fights with people like Tony Martin at Wesleyan College over him being labeled an anti-Semite, the things with Leonard Jeffries, all of these, video and audio of this is very important, you know what I mean? That this stuff not be lost. And, you know, one of the things I realized about how important it was, take Michigan State University. We're in New York. Michigan State University has what they call the African Activist Archive, where they have all of this stuff about Elombe that even we didn't have, dating back to the 60s and early 70s, you know, stuff in Philadelphia. You know, we recently lost one, the brother who was to the UN from Namibia, who lived in Harlem. Oh gosh, what is wrong with my memory today? Oh. We lost him about 3 years ago. I'm drawing a blank. But an example, they had flyers where him and my father were in Philadelphia, along with some other people that we didn't even know existed. And I'm like, why? And Michigan State University hosts this whole African Activist Archives, and we're here in New York, and they have all these things. And then you see stuff, private collection of this person, the flyers and the information from this outside of our community. Now, I met the guy who does it. Nice guy, Richard Knight, white guy, who's Michigan State. You know, they sponsor him to be here in Harlem and take care of that. Cool dude. But, you know, just to think that academic places outside of here are compiling and keeping this sort of stuff, you know, suggest about the importance of it, and you know that other people are paying attention and see the value of it. So the foundation, you know, we know we got a lot of work to do, and you know we have a big announcement that's going to be coming out that I can't lean into yet, but it's gonna be a fact. No, but listen, Jim, wait a minute, I'm gonna give you a hint. No, but it's gonna be changing. It's gonna be dealing with it's gonna be changing the face of Black college athletics. There's gonna really happen within the next 3 months. That I can't say which country and which HBCUs we're working in conjunction with, but it's right there. We halfway done.
Well, it can't be Morgan State because I haven't been.
It's not. It's not Morgan State. It's not.
Because anything that happens in Morgan State, I'm invited. So I have to. I'm just playing. I'm just playing.
It's not Morgan
State. Okay. Well, okay.
Debate.
Yeah.
I took it. Yes.
I know, right? It's like three. No. Because your Aggies comrade is shouting you out. Leah Boggs was a few years behind you. I think she said it.
Yes, and she's unfortunately she's right on what university she said. I'm not gonna say it, but she's right. It does involve that university. so I'll just say that.
Okay. Just quickly, just a quick response. Yeah, I see some of the chat. I know that cassettes and vinyl are making a comeback, but honestly, they're not making a comeback in many of the Black communities that show up in my classroom. That's really where I'm starting in terms of who I'm thinking about. These kids they're not checking for vinyl. They're not in those certain circles with certain, whatever. They're not in those circles. So
they're definitely not looking for these lecture tapes.
And they're not right. They're not and right. And the vinyl community is not looking. So I would, but anyway. So the digitization project is very much needed.
And not only that, I mean, even securing images, as people probably Google, use a lot of my Uncle Kwame's, a lot of his photographs right now are they're out there. With celebrities, especially ever since Rihanna had my uncle's photographs on her launch for her label, and she had pictures of my mother, she had pictures of my father when she launched Fenty. Ever since then, they've really taken off in the space of getting very popular in terms of nostalgia of Ajaz bringing forth the Black is Beautiful movement in the 60s. There is a lot of revisiting of that because and this book starts to do a little bit of that, speaking about the Grandassa model, speaking about Elombe first coming onto the scene. He was actually first a satirist and columnist, in the vein of Aaron Magruder, way before Aaron Magruder.
Oh wow, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
The artwork and the cartoons there was, along with the Amsterdam News at the time, there was another Black paper called the Citizen Call that he used to write for. And his actual columns used to appear on the front page of there. It was Citizen Call was started up by a former Black Tuskegee Airman, and he had a column with Congressman Carter and Beatnik Jackson. And in this book that the universe is edited by and compiled by Thomas Aiello. Again, he did a lot of work on this, and he went back. He found a lot of the old strips, brought those in. He also, I mean, the only thing he probably misses about the early artistic work is that Elombe's work with the inventor of Tarzan, because Tom Feelings, who some people may or may not know about, is one of our great Black creators, artists. And Tom Feelings was the first person to integrate the School of Visual Arts. Elombe was the second. But they already had a Black person in the 50s. Elombe wasn't supposed to be able to get in. But the creator of Tarzan had a very liberal wife who was like his writing style, his art is too unique, too magnificent. You have to make sure that this sort of thing gets broken. She made sure that he got into School of Visual Arts, and the School of Visual Arts is very important to his development because not only did they hone his creative and artistic talents, but what they did was it allowed him to also study how the art should be marketed, how you reach people. It also gave the business mind. Because a lot of what, when you start talking about the Black is Beautiful movement or the formation of the genesis of the Black arts movement, we really have to push the timeline back because Ajaz, I just saw something by Henry Louis Gates the other day talking about the Black is Beautiful movement, talking and basically saying it grew out of the Black Power movement, and that's not accurate. The Black is Beautiful movement grew out of the Black arts movement, because African Jazz Art Society and Studio, AJazz, was the first. Okay, even
well, we already know that Henry Louis Gates just stays, like
all
so,
you had to say was Henry
right.
Lewis. Now it's
like
he wrong.
you got me getting hyped. Like get him out of here.
Like, you even finished his name. It was like, nah.
But yeah, no. So I mean, both the head or the founder of, well, he was the head of the School of Visual Arts, but he was also the first illustrator of Tarzan. His name was Bern Hogarth. He did a whole lot of things, but he was the top guy. And after my father came in, a whole bunch of other members from AJazz, Chris Asmendese Hall, my uncle Kwame, and a few other people all started coming into that school. But initially, they were like, oh, we got one Black artist, we got one Black creative guy, we don't need anymore. But many people like Herb Boy, they'll talk about my father and Malcolm X meeting to their early meetings or things that Malcolm X had told to my father. But a lot of times in the essay book, people could read how the first time when my father went over to meet Malcolm, that he wasn't initially allowed in. He was not so much allowed in. He had to wait, because this book here, right, is basically came out of another book called Color Us Colored that my father did in 1963. Now, Color Us Colored really pillared and satirized most of the Black leadership of that time. It went hard at them. It was like a viral book. It upset a lot of people. So what happened really was that the Supreme Court, not the Supreme, Thurgood Marshall was succeeded at the NAACP by a Jewish attorney. Right now, his name eludes me also. But about 4 years ago, he passed in his 90s. And when his stuff went up, he had a collection of Color Us Colored in his personal collection. So when it went on eBay, it started people like, oh, who is this? At that time, my father was just known as Cecil Elombe Brath. So a lot of time people didn't put Cecil Brathwaite and Elombe Brath as the same person. Even I think this. Can you see this shirt here? Can you see what this is at the top?
Little.
Okay, this is
that
no. That's Elombe. That's Elombe and Percy Sutton. Percy Sutton, who owner of the Apollo Theater. This is the corner of 125th Street. It used to say, this is when they put up the four corners to say African Liberation Square. Okay, because at that time, my father, that's what, when he was moving away from AJazz and moving to Patricia Mumba Coalition thing, African independence, anti-colonialism, that was what was on his mind. That was the big deal. So those four corners from the Harlem State Office building where all our politicians going, right on 25th Street. Right now it says African Square, but if you could see this original, that's why.
I'm sorry.
Wow.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking at you were talking about Jack Greenberg at the NAACP.
That's we go. Here we go, Jared. Yeah. Jack Greenberg, right, when he passed.
Yeah.
His went up, and then all the people like, what is this book? And it selling for a high price. And it was like, oh, this was in that time, this was the collector's book. Everybody got roasted in here, or everybody got, what we call made fun of, or their politics, analyzed from this sort of thing. So that's really was the impetus that I believe for this book, because it sort of revived. Like, to get that book now, if you go to the library, it's basically what we call under like a lock and key. You can get access to Color Us Colored, but somebody, New York Public Library, they're gonna be still. You go in a room, it's a classic, and you turn the pages, and they're right there. You can't take it out. You can't take it with you to a desk. It's what they do when they have these sort of works that are classics and rare. They don't allow other people to get it. So of course we have, and what they did, that's a whole different other story how it came into. They actually, our foundation was about to re-put out Color Us Color and begin to look at this before the University of Mississippi Press. But I got a letter saying it has all to do with trademarks. It's a longer story, and it has to do with trademarks and copyright laws that have changed over time. And I just say to people, you better secure your stuff depending on when it came out, because other people will own your parents or grandparents' creative or literary works. So Jack Greenberg, he had it in his collection, and Color Us Color. But this is more than Color Us Color. There we go. That's it right there. American, which really, I mean, I think Color Us Color personally, today, if people see it, it would be shocking to the senses. You know, it would be like hard for some people, especially how it deals with issues of Black celebrity and Black and white, you know, beefs that people don't even know were taking place or that were happening, you know, were being played
So
out,
listen,
and all sorts of politics with that.
You mentioned Black celebrity, and we don't, because I know we're having to head towards a close here in a few minutes. So on what is just the first of what I'm going to just call into being many more future conversations with you and your crew. But speaking of Black celebrity, I mean, you've already mentioned Malcolm, you mentioned Fidel, you know, your father came into contact with directly or indirectly, you know, every luminary and major historical figure and movement in the Black world and beyond. Where do people like Carlos Cooks and Marcus Garvey and Garvey's movement, you know, where do those tributaries of the African struggle, where was he with, you know, where did he fit?
Those are, I would say, there's a thing that has a picture of Garvey, right? Then after Garvey, it has Malcolm, and then it has my father. There was this thing like Black conscious, but really that's not how that collage should look. It should really be Garvey, Carlos Cooks, and my father. Like, so it was Garvey, Carlos Cooks is his ideological son, and then my father would basically come right under that. Carlos Cooks and Malcolm.
So that's interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. Go ahead.
Because
Sorry.
initially, I mean, my father made a satire about Malcolm and they're eating pork. Malcolm liked it though. He's like, I got to meet this character. You know, Malcolm had a great sense of humor. You know, but really more so, what their conflict had a lot to do with colorism. African Jazz Art Society said was coming out of the Nation of Islam in terms of our hair texture being a curse. You know,
right.
And you know, some of them early speeches and all of that. That's really what a lot of the beef was about. And you know, really, Garvey was the stand. My father never met Marcus Garvey, although he was an emissary to his family. You know, just like he was an emissary to Patricia Lumumba's family. You know, he never met either one of them, but their wives and their families, you know, leaned on him, and he worked with them. When Garvey's wife wouldn't deal with anybody else, she allowed Elombe to come in and spoke with him and sat down with him when she wouldn't allow any other media. But I think when it comes to Carlos Cooks had a sort of personality that was abrupt. He could be abrupt. And Malcolm wanted to work with Carlos Cooks, but Carlos Cooks' style was like, so when Malcolm came up to him one time after they had Nkrumah, they had Adam Clayton Powell, they had Malcolm, it was all of them. And initially Carlos Cooks was left out of that hosting in the meeting. He started going, you know, street corner speakers. He got up on his perch, started going over there. They invited him over. He came, he blew the audience away. Later on, Malcolm came over to him and was like, how can we get together, brother? How can we get a program? I mean, how can we, you know, work together? And Carlos Cooks sort of was dismissive and said, whenever you get a program. And, you know, Malcolm humbled Malcolm said, thank you, my brother, and went away. I mean, Carlos Cooks shouldn't have handled the great Malcolm X like that, but that's actually what happened. You know, there's a cartoon, I don't know if you saw it, that it's on the internet about that occasion in that event. But
I think so.
well, I'll send it to you. But to make a long story short, you know, Malcolm's parents were Garveyites. You know, Marcus Garvey at one time, like, I mean, when he come to Harlem, everybody would be, I mean, out on their windows, in the window on their fire escapes, watching him and his army. He had these Black Nurses Legion, and he really brought a lot of Black women in, you know, to the foray of leadership and sort of controlling his organization. You know, I mean, he had a problem with his financials, you know, and the Black.
Well, I mean, that's sort of what I'm at. Like,
right, yeah.
Never mind those specifics or the claims or the whatever,
right.
but the overall economic philosophy.
Oh yeah, definitely. So like, Black. And that's what, right?
Like,
so,
but where does, but like, that's what I'm saying. So like, where does your father's internationalism and socialism fit in what are sometimes seen as contradictions when we're talking about Garvey, Carlos Cooks, and that line?
Well, and that's one thing where because my father was a member of Carlos Cooks' African Nationalist Pioneer Movement, ANPM. But I mean, when Carlos Cooks, but at the same time, he had already founded African Jazz Art Society and Studio with my uncle in 1956. You know what I mean? So they were doing different things. Say, for example, Carlos Cooks didn't want no media. He wasn't for the outside media. He wasn't going to allow it in there. My father's coming from a creative visual arts background where it's about marketing and that sort of thing. And
journalism,
you know, journalism is exactly. So they're going to have different things. I mean, my father did a lot of those Carlos Cooks' early flyers and those sort of things. And if Carlos Cooks had not had the Miss Natural Standard of Beauty contest, my father probably would not have created the Grandassa models, which really kicked off the Black is Beautiful movement in 1962. My father actually came up with the Grandassa models concept in 1961. According to his peers and contemporaries. But then in 1962, they kicked it off in Harlem, and then they went viral. Next thing you know, they're on all these album covers and everything. You know, they got Max Roach and Abby Lincoln supporting them, especially networking. Miles Davis doing some back financing of them, and they really sort of took off and did that thing. But really, Carlos Cooks, part of his whole thing, when he had the Miss Natural Standard of Beauty, it was just like one day. You know, and not only that, so they saw that, you know, all these Black women with natural hair and in their natural beauty parading, showing like, because, you know, prior to that, everybody's hair was combed, even most of the men, you know. So there's like, we gonna look at this different, especially my father's really coming out of a jazz music set, you know what I mean, with Lou Donaldson type of people, George Braith, you know, all of these artists, at Cannonball Adderley, you know, it's all these pictures of my father sitting down with all of these sort of guys. But then they started to politicize, you know, that, especially once they checked. The name went from Jazz Art Society to African Jazz Art Society to African Jazz Art Society and Studio. They added the S because they added to the studio. That's when they moved from the Bronx to Harlem, right outside the Apollo Theater. And then there's a host of things that, you know, transformed everything by being in the center of Harlem. And Harlem was the center of the Black world at that time. You know what I mean? Everything was, especially from a political formatting vantage point at that time. There was so much happening and so much going on. But it really was a combination of, I mean, because the Jazz Art Institute, there's some early books. My father did the illustrations in all of, in many of those books, you know. It's
wow.
You know, again, in here, you know, this book goes into downbeat jazz record reviews, beatbox jokes, because my father looked at, like, you know, a lot of the white interlopers and losing jazz, and not only that, having to go different places and hear jazz. Like, you know, we reclaiming jazz as an African art form, period. You know, and that's
my
what
godfather calls it Black classical music or African classical music. He's like, he doesn't even use the word, he doesn't like the word jazz. So like, you know, like, you know, but listen, unfortunately we got to wrap for now, but anything quickly that you would want us to know or follow up with? We got to get the book. I mean, I got to get the book now.
I would like to say, I would like to say right now, don't buy this book here.
Okay.
American Spy by Lauren Wilkinson. We have some issues that we're going to be dealing with them. That's a book that came out that's supposed to be turned into a novel. Barack Obama had it on the summer reading list, etc. But in this book, the author, Lauren Wilkinson, she has some information she says about the Patricia Mumba Coalition, where it's supposed to be the woman who was the first Black double agent spy, and she infiltrated the Patricia Mumba Coalition to she was an FBI CIA. Her job was to kill Thomas Sankara, and she knew that when Sankara came, that the only way she could get to him was going through the Patricia Mumba Coalition. And it's supposed to be a novel, so she's supposed to be able to legally get away with this, but she names a real life organization.
So what is this going to be? Judas and the Black Messiah Part 2?
You know, everything that's
Judas and the Black Messiah.
Look at the new Garvey movie. That's also about his informants. Everything is about the informant. She's supposed to fell in love with Sankara, so she couldn't kill him. But it's from Harlem to Martinique and all of this. And they name her infiltrating my father's organization. Even in there, she says that she's supposed to have flipped a family member as a double agent.
Oh my God.
You know what I mean? So she has made through a back channel media a private apology, but that's not enough.
No. Private apology? You got to be louder and more public an apology than you were in the lie in the first place to begin to heal.
She said that, well, our brother out of Houston, our great professor, Dr. Horn, said that they were going to be trying to turn this into a movie. That's definitely not going to happen, especially with Patricia Mumba Coalition being in a way that it's not. I mean, it's just a total exaggeration that of who Patricia Mumba Coalition were, its membership, its members, and just this organization. I mean, Patricia Mumba Coalition was an international organization. It was open for all types of different perspectives. And she just says it's just a cold Marxist organization that did this and did all of this in ex-Black. She doesn't have a grasp on what it is that although she says that she went there as a young girl and she was a fan of it, it's just the characterization and what they do can really be sort of dangerous. And look, I should make it clear, it's not Lauren Wilkinson. She doesn't reveal who the first Black woman double agent is, who the novel is based on. So I just like to make sure people don't buy this book, American Spy.
I just want to say real quick, just because I've just absorbed and soaked in everything that I just been having a great time taking notes and I'm gonna be broke all the books but see, this is my problem with Black Girl Magic. This is my problem with this whole entertainment media complex, the propaganda arm of this empire weaponizing this idea of Black Girl Magic. This is what happens, where all of a sudden
eyes can be sisters too.
That's
yeah, but I mean, if you read it, Jackie, the sister in here that they're talking about, who, if anything comes at us, I still want to know her name. I want to know her real name.
Can we?
She's like a superhero. She's in our community. FBI, CIA, working both sides. She allegedly she feels that because I don't listen.
No, we need to find out who she. We need to know.
Yeah, exactly.
Look, Cinque, Jackie, thanks to both of you. Please, if anybody can, if or is interested, and if you haven't already, become a member and join us in a few minutes for our fun a review of Boyce Watkins' work. But in the interim, Cinque, it's an honor to get to talk with you, for the first time publicly, and an honor to talk about your father. Personally, he was a giant for me, so I really appreciate this, and I cannot wait to do more. So I expect that's going to happen sooner than later. Please do stay in touch, man.
I look forward to coming back and
absolutely
talking about some more of the many things that we could talk about, because as I said, it's hard. It's so much.
Well, I'm
especially
gonna
as I
get the
go
I'm
through
gonna get the book
archives.
you do want
Yeah.
us to read today.
Yeah,
I'm ordering it today. So when you
Yeah.
come back, I'll be a little more ready, and we can get into a lot more. We can spend we'll set up and spend the whole couple
because
hours and
the essay book, you could only get this one because the essay book is sold out, and
Right,
there's
right.
no reprints coming until September at earliest. So, but thank you, Jeff, for having me. Thank you, Jackie,
Anytime.
for participating also. And
thank
I look
you
forward
for
to
all the
meeting
knowledge.
again with you guys in the future.
Yes, indeed. Peace, my man. Take good care.
Peace.
We'll talk to you
Okay.
soon. And thanks everybody. Look, a quick transition here. If we didn't get to anything, like my man Pierre at Comedy Hype says, please
Put it in the comments.
And we'll catch you on Monday morning right back here. But in a few minutes over there on the other live, and then at 11 o'clock back again for Ajabu Barack and Daruba Bin Wahad. Get your bagel, get some coffee, quick bathroom break for some of us, and all that good stuff. And again, big shout out to Cinque, and thanks again to you, Jackie, for coming through, and thanks to Josh and Aaliyah for helping out in the background of all of this. So appreciate all of you.
Thanks.
All right, peace, everybody.
Have a great
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.